Welcome to Moments with Marianne. Allow me to interrupt your train of thought with something that may be one of the most interesting things you hear today. This is Marianne Pastana, and our special guest today is Connie Zweig, and she's here to share with us her new book, The Inner Work of Age, Shifting from Role to Soul. So can extended longevity bring the opportunity for extended personal and spiritual growth? Our guest today is here to answer just that. So Connie is a retired psychotherapist, former executive editor of Jeremy Thatcher Publishing, former columnist for Esquire magazine, and contributor to the Los Angeles Times. So let's welcome to the show, Connie.
Thanks for having me, Marianne.
Well, it's an honor to spend this time with you, Dr. Connie, and to talk about your new work, The Inner Work of Age. What inspired you to write this?
Well, I have published several books about the shadow, Meeting the Shadow, Romancing the Shadow, and Meeting the Shadow of Spirituality. Those books explore how the unconscious mind affects us in daily life. And when I was entering my late 60s, I noticed that I started to feel disoriented. And I began to tune in to my own shadow because I've been doing this for so many decades now. And I really discovered surprising inner voices, inner dialogue, parts of myself that I wasn't anticipating at this stage of life, because I've done so much psychological work and so much spiritual practice. And then I began to try to read in the field of conscious aging or positive aging. And I discovered that there were no books about how the unconscious or the shadow is affecting us as we age. And so I knew I needed to make one more contribution.
I'm so glad that you did, because my goodness, what a book this is. And you dive into some things I've never heard about, but really do resonate and make sense when you talk about like personal shadow.
Yes. So, for example, there's a part of us that denies age. We live in a youth worshiping culture that is ageist in its institutions. You know, people are forced into retirement. The healthcare system has a lot of bias against older people. There's very little training for doctors. There's from the media portrays older adults in kind of patronizing, critical, demeaning ways. And so as children, we grow up with all this negative messaging and we internalize it. So that's a shadow that I call the inner agist. And as long as that internal figure is outside of our awareness, it's influencing us in ways that we can't see. So, for example, maybe we want to maintain our appearance and we end up feeling self-hate about what's happening to our bodies or our faces. Or maybe we want to maintain the rapid pace and driven work patterns that we've had at midlife so that we don't become irrelevant or invisible. So these are all part of the inner agist. And I explore in the book why it's important to break through denial and move towards self-acceptance so that we can actually take advantage of the opportunities and the possibilities that we have in this stage of life. We also deny death. You know, denial of mortality has been rampant in our culture. It's changed a little bit with COVID because so many people have experienced loss. But that's another internal shadow figure that stops us from recognizing that when we have limited time, there's an urgency to complete our lives. There's an urgency to find fulfillment now. And so I give a lot of tools and practices in the book for reviewing our lives and creating emotional repair and doing spiritual practice But if we deny death, then we're not going to feel any urgency to do that.
And isn't that the truth? Because then we're just kind of living in today, which I mean, I guess being in the present moment isn't necessarily a bad thing, but to avoid, or ignore the inevitable would be very short-sighted.
Yes.
So I know in your book you do answer like the questions like, when do I get old? And I think for a lot of people, that you hear nowadays that that's kind of a number, even though, I mean, what you said before is so right. I mean, we're so bombarded with how we should look, how we should dress, what's society's definition of old. How would you answer that?
Well, it turns out from research that old is in the age of the beholder. So the younger we are, the younger we believe old age begins. The older we are, the later we think it begins. So everybody is subjectively evaluating what's old. The interesting thing, Marianne, is that there's a new longevity now that's never existed in human history. I mean, it's a change in the species. So what's happening is that it used to be we would die in our 40s and then our 50s, and then we would get sick in our 60s and have a slow decline. Now there are people in their 70s, 80s, and 90s who are physically, emotionally, and cognitively thriving. And so we don't know how long we have, but we do know that this is an unprecedented stage of life. And in all of the spiritual traditions, every one of them, the religious spiritual traditions teach that this stage of life, after work, after family, careers over, grandparenting, even the grandkids are grown up, this stage of life is about spirituality. It's about contemplation. It's about looking within, evaluating all of the wisdom gained from our lives and harvesting that wisdom so that we can give back to our families, give back to the larger common good in some way. And so part of what I teach in the book is how to find a spiritual practice at this stage of life that can quiet your mind and help you to center and find a refuge within.
I really appreciate that because there's so much there as we look at age differently. And I love how you talk about, we now have the chance to become an elder and to really kind of focus in on that inner work.
Yes. In our society, there are no rites of passage for this stage of life. We have birth with christenings, and then we have bar mitzvahs, and we have marriage ceremonies, and we have all kinds of early rites of passage in earlier stages. But there's nothing for us in our 50s, 60s, and 70s, maybe a retirement party, and that's about it. So how do we become an elder? We become a senior on our Medicare birthdays. But that's not the same thing. Elder is a stage, not an age. So you could have someone who's 55 and is self-aware and compassionate and in service, who's an elder, but someone who's 85, who's rigid and bitter and filled with regret. That's not an elder. So it takes intention to become an elder. And so I have, again, practices in the book for people who are interested in that rite of passage to really shift their development and their awareness and step into this new stage of life.
Do you feel that there is a purpose to aging?
One of my teachers, Carl Jung, who was an early psychiatrist in the beginning days of psychology, made a beautiful statement. He said that the meaning and purpose of the afternoon of life is different from the morning of life. But if we continue to try to live the purpose of the morning, then there's damage to our soul. So for each of us, it's important to uncover our own purpose in this stage of life beyond midlife. I can't tell other people what their purpose is. A lot of people, especially people who are more extroverted, want to be engaged in activism, let's say for climate change or for social justice issues. They want to be in service with mentoring and volunteering. And they find new purpose and meaning in that way and giving back. Other people are more introverted and they want to go inside, have more alone time, let go of their roles and responsibilities, and be quiet and do spiritual practice and develop spiritually. So, this is it's not my job to tell people what their purpose is, but it is my message to say we need to uncover the internal obstacles that are stopping us from moving into this stage of life and keeping us from really becoming elders, and move consciously into aging so that we don't perpetuate ageism, so that we don't waste time, the precious time that we have left, and so that we leave some kind of legacy.
And what a legacy we could live, right?
There are a lot of possibilities. Just a grandparent can have an impact. Let me tell you how. I was saying in the beginning that we internalize ageism from the culture. If a grandchild has a grandma or a grandpa who models thriving in later life, creativity, activism in later life, then that child is getting a different message through that modeling about what aging can be about. And even just a presence. Sometimes I just sit with my 10-year-old grandson and I let him kind of absorb the quiet, the stillness in my body, because his household is very chaotic. And I can feel, it's almost like he's sitting under the shade of a tree. And I can feel that he's taking me in without even any words. And I know from my research that means he will have a different experience of ageism. He won't internalize that in the same way. And he won't have the same negative fears and beliefs that I had about growing older, because he can see that I'm thriving. He's actually excited that my new book just came out.
Oh my God, that's so cute.
Yeah. So that in itself is having an impact.
I know in your book you talk about the inner agist. What is that?
Well, that's what I was saying. That's this shadow in people that is beneath our conscious awareness that carries the internalized ageism and tells us we're useless or we're worthless. Let's say a man says to himself, now that I'm not a provider, I don't really matter anymore. Or a woman says to herself, now that I'm not beautiful and attractive to men, I don't matter anymore. That's the inner ageist. It's denying the value of this precious time of life and the beauty and the meaning of it and the opportunities. There's so many opportunities now. So the inner ageist is giving us those messages and therefore really stopping us from stepping across the threshold to become an elder.
Well, and I know you talk about also facing death. So how can we do that in a way that supports our growth? And also, we have to become realistic about these things,
Yes. So our culture has really, looked away from death. Children who experience the loss of a loved one early in life can overcome it and then not think about it for years. You know, adults experience a loss that may penetrate a little bit more, but we learn then how to compartmentalize it and look away and deny our own vulnerability. To become an elder, one of the qualities we need to practice is mortality awareness. And what do I mean by that? I mean that whatever your religious or spiritual beliefs about death and the afterlife, that's not what I'm talking about. I'm not telling people how to believe. What I'm suggesting is that our individuality, my Conniness, will pass with my body. My Conniness will pass. And since I've been practicing taking that in, I recognize that living in the moment, as you said, is so precious. And I want to fulfill my dreams. I want to live now with the time I have left. And I have 72 years of life experience. And I feel a great privilege to have lived this long. But I also know that there's a shortened time horizon now. And this time remaining is really precious. And so my husband and I ask each other, you know, what is the purpose of this day? What is the meaning of this time together? How can we make it most valuable to ourselves and to others? And so in that way, death becomes a teacher. It's not morbid. I'm not constantly focused on I'm going to die. I'm not suggesting that. But I'm also not looking away. I'm not in denial. And as a result, I feel a kind of urgency about this time and its preciousness. So that's what I mean by that.
Well, I appreciate you taking the time to explain that, because I think a lot of times people, they're not quite sure how to feel. And so having some type of, some type of just, guidepost on like, hey, these are some things that you can think about. One of the interesting things in your book, you talk about, just how to develop a spiritual practice. And for a lot of people, if they don't have one, how could they do that?
So in your religious tradition, whatever that is, Christianity, Judaism, Islam, Buddhism, Hinduism, there are mystical streams that are hidden within those traditions. They're not taught at most churches and synagogues and mosques, but they're there. And you can find them in books, and you can find teachers now, and even communities that are doing practices. And if you're not a part of a tradition and you're kind of unaffiliated, you can begin to explore and see what resonates with you. Many people are doing mindfulness practice now. It's kind of been separated from Buddhism, so you don't even have to have Buddhist beliefs. Other people are doing transcendental meditation or Zen practice or centering prayer, which originated in the Christian tradition and was brought out by Father Thomas Keating. And I interview him in my book. I interview a number of spiritual teachers from all the different traditions. So Buddhist teachers, rabbis, philosophers, Jungian analysts, and the main Christian teacher is Thomas Keating. And so there are many ways that you can find a practice and kind of attune to yourself, use your intuition, and see if you feel a fit, if it resonates with you. And then see if there's a teacher or community that resonates with you, that you feel drawn to. And if it doesn't work out, that's okay. You can pick up another one until you find one that's right for who you are now. Because, we don't want the same practices that we had in our 20s necessarily. We're seeking different things now. And then there's a deeper awareness that I call pure awareness, which is the silence that we experience in a meditation or contemplation practice. a prayer practice or a chanting practice, whatever works for you. There's a moment when the mind is silent. And that's pure awareness, without content, without an object of awareness. So that's a deeper level of self-discovery. And when you can sit in pure awareness, you can discover how your mind works. And you can learn how not to follow the noise in your mind, but rather to observe it and to experience pure awareness and find a refuge there. For me, I've been meditating more than 50 years. So I feel like I have a life raft that I can go to. I can go to pure awareness, anytime things are difficult for me. And I can let go of the stress and I can let go of the noise in my mind. And I can prepare myself to come out again and to face whatever it is in the circumstances of my world. So there are many levels of awareness, and I suggest that pure awareness, shadow awareness, and mortality awareness can be developed on our way to becoming an elder.
A lot of people use the word elder in many different ways. Is there a specific meaning that you're using when you talk about elder in your book?
That's true. And people use the word with wise elder in the vernacular. And people who have been studying indigenous cultures know that there is a rite of passage and there is a deep respect for older adults in those cultures. But we don't have that in white, Western, post-industrial culture. We're living with a lot of ageism. So I would say that for me, the elder has self-awareness. The elder develops compassion. The elder releases the ego's agenda and no longer strives to be heroic in midlife when we were all sort of building our empires. The elder begins to let go of that, begins to let go of all of the doing. And if there's doing, it's with a different state of mind. So in the book, I talk about activist elders, and they are in service in a different way, with a different quality of awareness than they were in midlife.
Well, I found your work to be so profound, and I really appreciated reading The Inner Work of Age. Where can our listeners connect with you, be part of your community, and learn more about all of your work?
You can find me on ConnieZweig.com.
Well, Connie, thank you so much for taking the time to be on the show with us here today.
Thank you. Much appreciated.
Well, thank you, Connie. It has been such an honor to spend this time with you and to talk about your new book, The Inner Work of Age, Shifting from Role to Soul. If you'd like to connect with Connie, you can at her website, ConnieZweig.com, for more information. Her book's available everywhere books are sold, and if you don't see it on the shelf, ask for them to order it, and of course, support our indie bookstores. Well, we're at the end of our time today. I would like to thank everyone for tuning in. You've been listening to Moments with Marianne, where we make every moment count.
In a single moment, your life can change. Moments with Marianne is a transformative hour that covers an endless array of topics with the best of the best. Her guests are leaders in their fields, ranging from inspirational authors, top industry leaders, and business and spiritual entrepreneurs. Each guest is gifted and a true visionary. A recognized leader in her own work, and while teaching others to develop, refocus, and grow, Marianne will bring the best guest and sometimes a special surprise. Don't miss this. You never know just which moment will change your life forever. Make sure to tune in and visit momentswithmarianne.com for more information.